Here. All right, we are live. Let's see here. Should have. I don't even know where we. Oh, there it is. Okay, cool. We should have people popping in. Cool. All right, there we go.
Very exciting.
Everyone's in now. Sweet.
Okay.
So hey everyone, welcome. I know we're starting a couple minutes late here. Hey Alex, how's it going? If you guys can see and hear, let me know in the chat, and we'll get started here in just a moment. I like the background. I like the sense of depth you got there.
This is actually my real. I do have a fake background, but this is my real.
That's a real background though, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I was like, that doesn't look fake.
No. This is a real. I do have like a fake background that's like this huge library. That's like, and it's funny you say that because like I'll get on calls and people will literally think it's real and they'll be like, "Oh, I love your library," and I'm just like,
Some of them look really believable now. It's nuts.
Yeah, they really do. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I wish it was mine. Like, it's got like thousands of books in it. I'm like, if that was the life I was living, man, like that'd be great. It's got like an Eames chair. Like it's the life all copywriters should be living for sure.
Custom built library just full of books, I think is like every writer's dream office.
Yeah. There's like a ladder in the back, it's crazy.
Yes. Yeah. Cool. Well, welcome everyone. We got my friend Chris Collins here with us today. This is what I'm calling a milestone series. I think this is the fourth one we've done here where we're discussing basically, chatting about this last year and all the hits that we've taken as writers through the economy, technological disruptions. In Chris's space in particular, there's been a bit of a tech apocalypse with, thousands and thousands of layoffs, big market correction that's been coming for probably a decade now, but just really hit spring 2022.
Yeah.
Yeah. And talking about how, highlighting people who are continuing to put the work in, make adjustments, and still get strong results. And talking with Chris, like even with all the things happening, he's still managing to put together 5-figure months, maybe not every month, but a few of them. He even had a 20K month this year. And we're going to be talking about how he's been able to do that, the adjustments he's made, covering the good, the bad, and the ugly. Thanks so much for hopping on, Chris. It's really, really great to have you.
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure. And I think the tech apocalypse or whatever. I mean, I think the thing that's jumps out at me is for the first, for me, it didn't really start affecting me until fall of last year.
Okay.
And, I remember things were pretty consistent until last September, October, right? Yeah. And this is when things really started to go off a cliff, right? And we were talking about how this is my real living room back here. I was literally on that couch back in October, on the phone being oh my God, I've got zero pipeline. What am I going to do? I was talking to my parents and they're like, maybe you should do some pitching. And I was like,
Jacob would love you.
Exactly. And I was in such despair. I was like, there's no way anybody's going to respond to a pitch right now. I was just in that negative space. Right. And I mean, it was several months that things were really quite bad.
Yeah.
And I think, and this is probably something I would imagine people on this call can relate to. I would say December, January into February, I was going through this funk where I was like, is it me? Do I have the stench on me? Or is it the economy? Is it AI is just effing everything up? What is going on?
It's so hard to know.
Yeah. And I think the big thing for me was I just started talking to a lot of people at that point. And I was like a couple of Ali Goulet, who I've done you were on our podcast when we were running that. I was talking to her frequently and she was no, dude, I haven't had an incoming lead in months. that, I mean, I don't want to speak for what, I should probably be a little more discreet, but whatever.
Sure.
But many people were telling me similar things.
Yeah.
And like, it started to just dawn on me like, oh, like February, March, it's like, this is bad.
It's not just you.
Like, it's like, this is like a systemic thing. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that partly what happened was like, I think whatever was going on in like Q1 sort of subsided. Right. Like I started seeing like more lead flow come in sort of organically. And that sort of helped me get out of like the psychological funk that I was in. Like, and I think that's always important. Like, and so I think mindset like has been huge, like managing mindset all throughout the year.
To set some context, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it was October 2019 when you DM'd me about hitting your first 10K month. Was that the right year?
2020. Yeah.
2020.
October 2019. I think I got my first like 1K gig.
Okay.
Right.
And 1 year later, crossing the 10K mark.
And those were just like the like, roaring 20s of SaaS, right? Yeah. Like when you could just like go.
This whole last decade has kind of been the roaring 20s of SaaS.
Yeah. And I feel like, I think that a lot of people maybe don't appreciate like how the SaaS market has so rapidly changed, right?
Yeah.
Like, because like, I feel like back in even 2019, there weren't that many people working in SaaS, right? I was looking around, I was like, okay, Josh Garofalo, Joel Kletke, Rachel Pilcher, but like, it wasn't like hundreds, and now I feel like it's like, there's a new SaaS copywriter following me on LinkedIn every day.
Yeah.
So you've got more and more people chasing work in an environment where like VC
layoffs
funding is just dried up.
Funding's dropping. Yeah.
the dynamics are just completely flipped from what they were a few years ago. Right.
Yeah.
So I feel like one thing, just to tie that up, is just like, it's important to be realistic about, you want to fish in, in ponds where there's lots of fish, and that's just not SaaS right now.
Sure. Can you take us through like what you're up until this like hit, this fall 2022 hit? What had kind of your career looked like, once, because you went full time at the point where you had been hitting your first 10K month.
Yeah. Kind
of as you went from there, how long did it take you to kind of make 10K more of like an average versus a here and there? And how is kind of your career? What does it look like in terms of earnings and demand? Like, again, you don't have to walk us through the full, but just to give us a picture of what sort of your business looked like leading into this hit, kind of what did things look like?
Well, I mean, I will be transparent that like feast or famine, I think, is something that most freelancers I know struggle with on some level. And that certainly was something that I was still working with, like up until like things kind of dropped off.
So what would be like a pretty typical yearly average, would you say? Or maybe for the year prior to the hit? Well, do you mind sharing that?
Yeah, sure. Like I was probably averaging 8 to 10K months, and like I would often have like, 10 or 15K, like, and every now and then you'd have a month that wouldn't be quite like, quite at that level.
Yeah.
But like things were very stable, like prior to like sort of like our SaaS nuclear winter, right?
Yeah.
And I think that like one thing that helped me, I think both before and since, was like one thing that I've thought about a lot is like, you want to be specialized, right? Like you have like through this year, like I've become more and more specialized with the kind of work that I've done, right? Like I'm like really focused now on like messaging strategy and web copy for like B2B SaaS, right?
Okay.
But I think it's also really important to have like sort of like an off menu of services. Like, I've done a lot of long form content, like I do case study, like you don't want to be reliant only on that one specialization because like, especially in something like messaging strategy, like you go a month or two, like without getting one of those big projects in the door, and you can't just be like insisting on that all the time. So I think being flexible and being willing to say, okay, I might not get my ideal projects all the time, but like, what are the other things that I can offer that are going to like help me, sustain my income, I think has been really important.
So it was like did you have any like blog retainer gigs as part of that, or was it more one-off stuff here and there?
Actually my first retainer ever, like I picked up this year.
Cool.
Yeah, I've never done blog stuff on retainer before, but what I
Okay.
did have were a lot of kind of like informal things where people would like just come to me, like, I mean, they weren't like formally structured as retainers, I guess you'd say, right? Like, you know,
That's interesting to note that you were doing anywhere from 8 to 15K a month without retainers. So that would require a decent volume of lead
yeah.
flow.
Mhm.
What were you doing? I know at a certain point you were getting inbound. Um, what were you doing? Like, where did most of your leads come from?
That's an interesting question. So, like I would say before, like I was thinking about this like before we got on this call, like
Yeah.
almost all of my leads are like referrals or I'm really bad at tracking this stuff, right? But I think that like it's very rare that like I'll get like leads from like LinkedIn or from like, outreach or something like that, right? It's almost always like I'm in a group where somebody is like, hey, here's a lead that like, or
I've
I've got like just a client who's
I've
like,
heard with SaaS in particular,
mhm,
like SaaS communities are like the hotspot for gigs. I remember Joel Kletke telling me that like 95% of his copywriting clients back when he was doing that were from like one
mhm.
Slack group.
I totally believe that. Like, so one person I'm thinking of in particular who I know does like just a, like, I mean, who makes 8 to 15K a month look like pocket change. Like she is in like, Peak Freelance, Superpath, like all of these communities, and she just picks up work like crazy. I mean, like I aspire to have like her diligence on picking up gig is crazy.
Yeah.
But like for
Oh,
me, it's mainly like groups
is
that
it
are
is this
like,
Elise?
no, it's
Okay.
it's I don't think she'd mind me saying this. It's Steph Travato, actually. She was on
Okay.
Copywriter Club talking about, I mean, she did like I think over 300K one year. Like it's insane. Like
And does she do that all herself, or does she kind of have her own little white label agency going on?
that I'm not sure about.
Okay.
Like I think that's a
But she's
very
getting the
reasonable
lead flow
question.
to support that. That's kind of the
For
point
sure.
there. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I believe she does it herself, but like it has been a question of mine, like how on earth are you executing on that? So that's a side question.
Yeah. Another
Yeah.
topic.
Yeah. But like for me, like it's interesting we're talking about Superpath and those communities because like it's like a mental note for me that I'm always like, oh, I need to join Superpath. But like for me, it's mainly like communities that are alums of like Think Tank, Magnetic North, which is like Amy Posner's mastermind, like groups that I've been in with other people who are like experienced copywriters. And I found that those groups, like, somebody will often pop in and be like, I can't take this lead. Do you like, is there somebody in here who wants it? Like, and that's not like a huge lead flow. But like when you combine that with like just other things that I feel like I'm doing, like reaching out to past clients, like, you know, like I just feel like it's, you're just sort of like, it's important to be reaching out to clients, and keeping your lead flow going consistently through a variety of channels. So, yeah.
So you went from 8 to 15K
Yeah.
months,
Mhm.
pretty stable.
Yeah.
Tech apocalypse hits. What
Yeah.
did that 3-month period like? Because like
It was bad.
sometimes I get
It was
people
really
say like
bad.
my lead flow dried up, but like they still have carryover. So were we down to like 0? Or were we down to like 2, 3,
Oh, I
four
mean,
k a month?
it totally wiped me out. Like
Okay.
I had like a couple of projects during that time
Yeah.
that sort of kept me going.
Yeah.
One web copy and messaging, like that sort of like kept the ship afloat.
Yeah.
But other than that, like I mean, like it was very dire for a couple of months, and like it was like not a time in my life that I ever
You
want to
don't
revisit again.
once you get to that like stable, you don't expect to have the big drop.
Well, right. And I think it's interesting because like I know a couple of people who I know, like, this is a side note, but like, you know, I grew up pretty comfortably, right? Like both parents were teachers, right? But I have some copywriter friends who like had less comfortable childhoods and are
Yeah.
very like intentional about always keeping leads coming in the door, always, right? And I had sort of always been like, oh, the money will be there, right? This very much rewired that for me,
Okay.
right? It was like after this experience, I was like, the money very much may not be there.
Yeah.
Like, you need to keep the rent paid, you need to like keep your, your 401k getting money piped into it and all that stuff.
That's an interesting distinction, because like for me, even at points in my career where like I'd made, 15K the last 20 consecutive months, there was always this little part of my brain terrified that like nothing was going to show up the next month. And I'm wondering if it is because like I heard my parents talking about money so much when I was a kid in like a like concerned way. And so it's funny how like the brain can be wired different towards, in the same situations.
Oh, I think it's like totally like, I think that family background often has a lot to do with how we think about things. Like I know my parents,
especially like, money,
they're very comfortable now. Like they're both retired. Like they sit around, like they've got like, mom's like chilling out at home, like running her like wreath building business on Etsy. Right. But like, if I ever have like financial, and during this, right, she's like, well, do you need us to help with the rent? Like anytime something like this comes up, and I'm like, no, like, because like you don't want to have like the risk reduced like in these kinds of situations.
Yeah,
right?
You want the pressure.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, so I guess like I feel like we're getting way far afield like from the initial conversation. Okay. but I feel like it's just been really important. Like one thing that I felt like we were going to come on here and talk about was like, well, how do you keep leads coming in?
Yeah.
And I've just felt like I've been so unsystematic about that this year.
Yeah.
But like, I feel like what I've observed is just like, you have to like be just ruthlessly proactive about getting yourself out there.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about all of a sudden we find ourselves 3-month stretch. Everything's dead. Yeah. What do you mind sharing what like the lowest amount you made in a month was? Zero. Okay. Literally a zero.
Absolutely.
Month.
Absolutely. So, February, I did not make anything.
Okay. February. Now, between February and now, you've had a 20K month.
Yeah.
And
that's true.
At least two 10K months.
Right.
So that's only a stretch of what? March, April, May, June, July, August, September. So we're talking about 8. Like, how do you go from 0 to a 20K month? Like, what did you do to kickstart things back up to that?
Actually, so one of the tips that like this, I think, so February-ish maybe, like one of the books that was really impactful for me this year was Never Eat Alone by Keith Ferrazzi, which is sort of like a more modern, so I don't know if you've read it, but it's a little bit like How to Win Friends and Influence People. Okay. But sort of like a more modern, like, it just really drills home the importance of building relationships. Like, and it really put in my head, like, okay, like you've got a lot of relationships already, like go out and take advantage of the relationships you have. Right.
Yes.
And like, I wouldn't say like March and April were gangbusters months for me. I mean, they were still both well below what I was used to making. But I think the first thing that I did was like, having read that book and then talked to Allie again, because Allie, God bless her, she will just hoover up gigs. She is Allie and Steph both are fantastic at bringing in work. Like she really, I mean, you should bring her on if you want to talk about that.
100%.
But she was, one of her things that I had learned from her was like, you just need to like email your clients and just remind them that you exist. Like, and so I would just literally email people and be like, hey, it would be like, I saw your LinkedIn post, or I saw this post about your company, blah, 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 that made me think of you, or whatever the pretext was, and then just sort of like, mention that I had capacity and ask if there was anything I could help with. Yeah. And I just did that a whole bunch. And that got quite a few. I mean, of course, there were a lot of people that it always is when you're doing that kind of thing.
When you've been doing it for several years, like there's a big field that you can reach out to.
Yeah, a lot more than you would think, because and that was the hump for me. Was like, I think I was just very unused to doing that kind of thing. I was used to things coming in and me not having to really work very hard for it, right? Yeah. And so like,
but I want to mention with that to everyone watching this, like, you have not been absent on personal branding. Like you have not been systematic, but I see you periodically pop up on like LinkedIn, and back when I was still on Twitter, yeah, I'd see you pop up on Twitter, like with like you were making a maybe not a systematic effort, but you were investing time here and there and maintaining your personal brand, you know, from time to time. And I've also seen you have little spurts where you've like posted consistently for a bit. And that like that helps keep you in the picture for when you do need to go intentionally start pulling on some threads. It's like, instead of it just being, hey, these people haven't heard from you in, you know, 4 years, it's they haven't worked with you in 4 years, but they see you around, you know?
Yeah, totally. And like something that like I'll occasionally hear on sales calls is like people will be like, "Oh, I love your content." And I'm like, "Really?" Like I've never heard of you before, right? You know, but like, you know, and I think it is a little bit more fraught right now because like reach on like LinkedIn at least is like slowly declining.
Sure.
You know, so like, you know, but still like, you know, when I post on LinkedIn, like, you know, 20 or 30% of the people who are seeing it are like execs and CEOs and like, you know, people who are probably in my target market. So like they're not like liking it, but they're like those are the people who are seeing it.
Yeah.
So yeah, but like to your point, or to loop back, yeah, like I just like emailed a shit ton of people. And I can't even remember what the exact projects were that came in. Like it's been several months, but like I do remember that took me from like, you know, 0 in February to like a few thousand in like February or in March and April, and got me to a place where I was like, okay, like I'm not dying. Like, you know, like I can, you know, pay my bills and like things can, you know, the world will keep turning. So that was kind of like the first step.
Something I've kind of been taking note of myself over this last year, because, you know, I went in-house for 9 months in 2022, and that, you know, when you get back out, you're like kind of having to rebuild some deal flow, some clients. And the thing is, like, as you go through your career, you build this like network potential, but you still like, it's not, a lot of people hear referrals, or they hear, oh, like I reached out to my network, and they kind of just zone out because one, they underestimate their own network, and two, they're missing the piece that you still have to be able to pitch your warm network. Like you have to be able to offer them something that they need, you know, like I know a lot of people who have the budget to pay me big paychecks, but they're not in that position because they just hand out free money to anyone looking to do some work for them. Like you have to offer them a pretty compelling value and pitch that really fits what they need in order for them to expend that budget, you know, even when you have a solid relationship.
So I'm curious, like, do you do a lot of warm pitching? Because like, you know, this is like one of those things where like, you know, for my own like lead acquisition, like I think I like go to cold pitching too much, if that makes sense. Like I'm always like, you know, like, because I think there's like maybe a bias where I'm like, oh, well, like I can just pick the leads I want, right? With like cold pitching, right? But like obviously with warm pitching, they've heard of you, they know who you are, and they're much more likely to say yes.
I will never send a cold pitch when a warm pitch is available.
Okay.
That's what I teach at every stage of the process, whether you're just beginning, you know, that's why the first thing I have people do is reach out to friends and family and let them know you're doing copywriting now. You know, I've sent more pitches this year than I've sent in the previous probably 3 years. And they've pretty much all been warm pitches because, you know, like over 11 years, you build a big network. There's a lot of people that like I haven't worked before. It's, you know, the pitch itself is not, I haven't pitched them. I haven't worked with them, but they know who I am. And that gives you like it, you can send people really targeted, really well-structured pitches, and with cold pitching, they may not even look at it, you know? So when you feel like you have a compelling pitch to offer with a warm lead, with a warm network, you at least know they'll look at it. Like there's still a very small percentage are going to hire you, but they'll look at it. That you'll at least get the pitch read. And so, yeah. So for me, like, unless the only thing that would require me to get back into cold pitching would be if I was trying to scale into like an agency. And I've opted to take more of a, like I use freelancing more just to cash flow me when I'm investing a lot of money into like more longer term businesses. So that's kind of what I've been doing.
Yeah. That's interesting because like I've sent a lot of pitches this year, mostly cold, but like, like I sent one warm pitch this year, 100% reply rate, 100% uptake. Right. And then like I've sent like, 40 or 50 cold pitches and like, one reply, we're not interested. Right. So I was just thinking about it when you were saying that. I was like, oh, like I just need to like tap my actual network. Right.
Cold pitching is harder now. It really is. Like this is one thing when 5 years ago, I think you could, like, I'm going to need to start revising some of my recommendations because the only people that I know with cold email, cold LinkedIn is a different story. Like if I would be doing cold pitching, it would be semi-cold via LinkedIn now versus like email. The only people I know who are still having success with email, and this is not necessarily a huge sample size, but they're using automation to send like 1,000 to 1,500 pitches a day. Like it's just stupid volume, the people who I see having more success with cold pitching is like social DM type pitching. There's more direct connection than like people just don't open like spam emails, because when you're sending out pitches, you're doing what most people would consider spam, even if you're sending them a good pitch. And like people just don't open or even entertain that stuff to the same degree. Now that said, I hired 2 contractors this last year, for 5-figure gigs off of cold email pitches that they sent me. So it's not that it can't work. It's just, you really gotta send a lot of volume out to get the email working.
Yeah, I feel like it's gotta be just like because I remember when I first got started, like I would send, like I'd probably get like a 3 or 4% response rate, maybe something like that. And at the time I was like, Jesus, this is a lot of work for like these kinds of results. Right. And I mean, I can't even imagine like, sending 1,500 emails.
It's so funny, like the differences in perspectives on like, it's funny too, because like 5 years ago, in my estimation, this career was just so free. Like it was just so easy because nobody can write. Like literally, like a very small percentage of people can write effectively. And like most of the people who can, they're literary creative backgrounds who really struggle to understand analytical marketing objectives. So like if you just could balance a common sense view of hitting an objective and you could write effectively, like it was so easy to land work, but nobody felt that way. Like from being in a coaching role, like most of the people I'm working with, they had that feeling of like, oh, I got to send 20 pitches. That's so much work. And I'm like, you can manufacture money for yourself writing 20 emails and that doesn't excite you. Like that feels like too much work. And now we're here 5 years later and it's different. And now it's like, you kind of actually do have to do a little work now. Like 1,000 emails is a little harder than 20. But it's funny how like views don't change. I feel like the general sentiment towards this field has not changed at all in the last 10 years, even though the market conditions have massively changed. And so it's just funny to observe. And like even what you're saying, like doing 20 emails was like, man, this is so much work. And now you're like, I wish I could go back to just 20 emails.
Oh man, I had like a system down. I was sending out hundreds of emails. Like I was like going through, like doing it with reply, all that stuff, right? And now I'm just like, oh man, those were the halcyon days when like you know, right? But I mean, I do think like one thing like that's coming out of this for me is just like the quality and personalization of your pitch matters so much more, right? Because like the one person that I pitched successfully this year was like somebody who like I had tried their product already. Like they got a VC round. I emailed them like that day and I was like, yo, are you going to need messaging? Like we should talk. And like, you know, that was like such a much more effective pitch than, and he knew that I had tried their product because I had previously emailed them and been like, you might want to add this feature, right? Like that was like such a much more effective pitch than like, you know, I'm talking about going back to 2020, but like all those pitches were like so manufactured, like, hey, I saw that you blah 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 whatever, like whatever I found on LinkedIn, right?
Yeah.
Like I got some calls, I probably got a few projects, but like not the same level of like relationship coming out of it, you know? So yeah, I don't know. Like I just feel like that's what you need more with your pitches these days. It's just like that level of like personalization.
Yeah, you kind of have to start a little bit of a conversation. And then the other thing is like speaking to what they actually care about, you know? Like we were talking about this on the Right Minds call this morning of like, if, you know, if I'm pitching a large company to be like a contract or staff writer for them, you know, like metrics don't matter. You're not pitching, you know, a founder, you're pitching a content marketing manager. You know, they don't care about metrics. They're the one in charge of metrics. They care about, are you going to like follow directions? Are you going to hit deadlines? Can they give you feedback once and have you apply it from there instead of needing to give you the same feedback over and over and over? Which is a lot of the stuff that makes you a good freelancer, you know, is like basically it's all the same things, but you have to actually intentionally speak to it versus just like, how do I do and this is honestly the biggest mentality that I feel like I have to combat from a coaching standpoint is so many people coming in looking to just do the bare minimum and expecting like whatever potential results they see other people talking about versus over how can I just get clients easy. And like the further we go, the more you have to like be intentional, you know, like the relationship building, the thinking about, you know, seeing every contract as a bridge that you want to maintain over time. And that's why some freelancers get tons of referrals and others don't get any, even after they've been doing this 5-10 years, is that the people who really value that each client they get and do their best, like those are the ones who tend to get the referrals and the repeat work. And the feeling, I mean, you know, I know it's been a few years since we were having regular interactions, but like, I mean, I always got to feel, you know, when we were hopping on weekly calls that like you really give a good effort. Like you remind me a lot of Mike Blankenship. Like, you really try to do a good job with your clients. And it shows in the fact that just by like starting to reach back out, all of a sudden, a lot of the work starts coming back in.
Yeah. And like I mean, I don't, to a certain extent, I have a lot of thoughts on what you just said, but I mean, I guess like,
share like, I'd love to hear.
Well, first of all, like it goes back to that, like how the market is changing, right?
Yeah.
Like it's just not the roaring 20s anymore. Like you've got so many people who like, I feel like there is a perception that like copywriting is just like, sorry, like the light is whatever. The copywriting is like easy money. You know, you just like do the writing and you send it over and you get like, you know, fat stacks of cash or whatever. And like the thing is, there's like so many people who are chasing that right now. Like, but you really, to stand out from that mass, you have to deliver on a higher level. And that means things like, you know, I mean, it doesn't even really mean being that good of a writer. It just means delivering a really good client experience.
Yep.
Like that's one of the big things that I have learned over the last couple of years is just like, I go back and I look at like the work I did in 2019 is like, my work is probably like 10-20% better now. Like it's not that much better. Yeah. But I'm just way better at like understanding what clients want, like sitting there and shutting them up and like letting them talk and then listening. Yeah, exactly. Like there's just all these intangibles about, well, actually tangibles, like they are, but like all these things that you learn about how to give good client interaction. Yeah. That people really value and really appreciate, like responding to emails quickly, right? Not being like, I'm so busy, I can't respond to this for like, 5 hours.
To make you wait
Nobody
48 hours. It's my
nobody is
policy.
fooled by that.
Yeah.
Like, they respond to your emails in 5 minutes, you should do the same thing,
Yeah.
right? Like, so I mean, this is all kind of a bit of a rant, but it's just to say that like, yeah, like it has become much more competitive. And I think you just have to take really seriously that like, I need to like at all different levels do what I need to do to stand out. And just to tie it up, like the thing that I've got like written here at the top of my like little notes here is like mindset, because like I really think like it's not tactics, it's not like that should I be cold pitching more, it's not like, it is like you have to like have the right mindset like every day. And like that has a hell of a lot more to do with like, are you going to be successful than like what particular thing you're doing to like get business in the door.
And I think, and feel free to, if this isn't kind of what you were intending with that, feel free to let me know. But I think what makes mindset so important is just that it directly translates to the actions that you take. Like the longer you hold something in your mind of I need to do this, but I'm not doing it, like it spirals, like we get in these procrastination spirals where we know we need to be doing something, but we just put it off continuously. And it's a muscle, like every time you choose to put something off, it's easier to put it off the next time. And every time you choose to just like, bite the bullet and just do it, get it done. Like that's a muscle too. You get better and better and better at that. And like I have ADHD. I get the there's valid reasons why people struggle with that, but it doesn't change the fact that the more you choose to like just let yourself, the more you allow yourself to spiral on certain things and procrastinate, the easier it becomes, and so building the habit of like, hey, when I know I need to do this, I just do it. And I set my environment up to push me into doing it as much as possible, instead of, having an environment that encourages me to put it off. And kind of with that in mind, like I want to get into kind of some of the tangibles of like, what did you do leading up to getting some of those big months back, and where did the work come from? Like as you started to get, like when you had that 20K month, was that one client, was that 5 clients? Like kind of what did some of these specifics look like?
It was several. Like so there's like a mindset track and like a how did you get the work track, right?
Yeah.
To this conversation, right? So I mean, like they kind of dovetail a little bit, right? Because like I think like, and I'm interested to hear your like I kind of want to go back to the mindset piece, because like I feel like there's like, for me, like I was going into the year, like at the beginning of the year, knowing that like this year was going to suck, like, or like it was going to be challenging, right? And I was like, okay, I need to do the things that I need to do to like keep myself in a place where I can like, where I'm not going to be letting myself slip, right? Where I'm going to be like, so like I'm like, my personal mantra, this is like written in my notes, my personal mantra is sleep, exercise, therapy, and meditation, right? Nice. Like, I mean, I have like repeated that so many times to people, because like if I don't sleep enough, if I don't go work out, if I don't meditate, like it makes a noticeable difference, truly. And I like literally check it off on a spreadsheet. Did I do these things, right? And I think for a while I like sort of was like, oh, well, if I just do these things, like then like the shit will take care of itself, right? Well, that's not actually true. So like I know I'm like being kind of all over the page, maybe in a slightly ADHD kind of way. To go back to May, I mean, I feel like things had, like I'd been like really focused on like doing anything I could to get work in the door.
Yeah.
And my perception of what happened was just like, I felt like, honestly, I felt like it was almost a karma thing. Like, I was doing everything I could, and I felt like the economy sort of like clicked back into place a little bit. Like clients that I had like not heard from in a long time came back. I started getting referrals from people who like I had not gotten referrals from in a long time. So like I got a big website project from like a person who often refers those kinds of projects to me. And so like it wasn't like I went out and like pitched 100 people or anything. Like it was like routine is key, right? Like I kept doing these things like consistently, right?
Yeah.
Like I was just like, you know, every day I'm like working out and meditating, like I'm sitting down, I'm like trying to find ways that I can get work in the door, right?
Yeah.
And so I know that sounds very like nebulous, but it truly was like these referral channels and lead channels that had worked well for me, like just started to come back, right? And they worked well, like May, June, July, August, like they've gone pretty successfully. And I think one thing that I think about a lot is like, okay, but you need to be proactive. And so like in September, I was like, oh man, things feel really dry right now. Like I don't feel like I've gotten a solid lead in like 3 or 4 weeks, right? And that was when I just like went hardcore pitching, like, you know, like we talked about before this, right? I was just like, it didn't bring a ton of results, but like it kept me in the mindset of being like, I am doing as much as I can to get work in the door. And then actually
and
literally,
oh, sorry, you finished.
one last thing,
on something. Yeah.
like pitching did not do shit for me,
Okay.
but like but literally in the last 3 days, right?
Yeah.
Like I had another website project come in, like I had like a project that like is like sort of one of those like, you know, off menu projects come in that like, you know, I don't love it, but I'll do it because money. And then this morning, like, you know, a past client came in with like another piece of work. So it's like one of those things where like staying in that proactive frame of mind where you're just doing things like keeps you moving forward till your other channels can like be successful.
There seems to be sometimes there seems to be a correlation between proactive inputs and outputs, even when in outcomes, even when the outcomes don't seem to be directly caused by the inputs. So like just a personal example for me, over the last few months, I've been putting a lot of time and money into longer term projects. And I was getting a point where I was like, man, like my cash flow is pretty low. My expenses are like just absolutely insane right now due to business stuff as well as San Diego rent and also
Yeah,
like
I bet.
alimony and child support payments, you know, based off of pretty extensive earnings over the last few years. So like sitting here with like my minimum monthly expense is like 16K, you know, and like my cash flow has gotten pretty low. And so I was like, I've been doing all these things that are like long-term projects, but I was like, okay, I should probably be thinking about like doing a little more pitching and getting some service work in the door. Thinking about that for like 3 months, not doing really anything, just thinking about it. And then this month, for the first time, I actually started pitching. One of the pitches I sent resulted in like a 20K gig, but like in addition to pitching, all of a sudden I had a bunch of people show up offering me work. So I ended up landing like 4 gigs.
That's funny.
3 of the gigs weren't from my pitching, but like the moment I started pitching, not only did I get some stuff from the pitching, but I got a bunch of stuff unrelated to the pitching. I mean, it honestly, it could just be coincidence, but it seems like once you start pushing on threads, stuff happens behind the scenes that you're not really aware of. Like there's people that you may pitch that don't need your work, but they're like, hey, so-and-so, like someone just pitched me. I thought you mentioned you needed a copywriter, and all of a sudden they show up, you know, like I just find that stuff like that happens where like I can be thinking about doing something for a while, nothing happens. But then once I actually take even 1 or 2 steps, all of a sudden it's like it rattles something in the, you know, in the trees and other things start dropping.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't like to be like super woo, but like I've observed that kind of thing too, you know? And like I just feel like for me, I just feel like just when I'm moving things forward, like I just feel like I'm doing my job, right?
Yeah.
And like, you know, that could be like it could be pitching, it could be like getting posts out on LinkedIn every day, but like I need to be doing my part to like make sure that, you know, I'm getting work in the door. And but so like it's like a very, I wish I had like a more systematic way of thinking about it. I feel like that's something I need to dial in. Like I feel like I've come on here and just been like, well, it's a mess. But one other thing that I did want to say though was like and this is like sort of related to some of the things we're talking about. Like I read a lot of sports psychology this year. Like I don't know if you've done any of that as part of your business, but like Tim
A little
Grover, who's
back when I was actually playing sports, but not anything in recent years.
I was surprised how helpful that was. Like Tim Grover was like Michael Jordan's coach. He's written a couple of books. He wrote one called Winning, and it talks like a lot about like Kobe Bryant and his Mamba mentality, and you know, like it just like puts you in the mindset of how like, oh, there's actually like people who have done like way harder things than you're doing, and they worked way harder than you, and here's what they had to do. And that like sort of does, it's just like a mental reset, right? It's like, well, if you want to make this work, like the level of commitment you need to bring is like probably a lot more than what you think it is, right?
Yeah.
So
and kind of getting to answer this question here of where do you find inspiration? Before you answer that, I want to mention that like for everyone who's trying to get to their first like consistent like 5K months, for every like whenever I'm working with someone in that position, you're trying to get up to making like 5K months as a freelancer. This is the key right here, what David mentioned here, finding something that you'll do consistently, because you don't have a lot of the stuff built that me and Chris do, to where when we start to get pinched, we can go tap that warm network that we've been building for 5 to 10 years. You have to create all those connections. You have to create those relationships. And the best way to do that is just through something that you can do consistently. First 3 years of my career, every morning, the first thing I would do is spend an hour pitching. And this was all cold pitching. This was just like looking up job boards, job listings, Craigslist ads, whatever I could find, just reaching out to random people. I would sometimes click on Facebook ads from like marketing companies and pitch them. Just anything that you can do consistently. Once you get past that, every freelancer I know who's doing consistent, reasonably consistent 10K months, or kind of in that 8 to 15K range, the biggest thing they struggle with is like motivation, like to like keep pushing, you know. And it's really interesting how everything shifts from like, it's like the important thing is kind of mechanics and consistency, to all of a sudden the importance is just, how do I stay wanting to like work at this, even when like, you know, we're making a lot larger amounts than most people make in salaried employees. And so I'm curious, like what is your focal point of inspiration in this space?
Well, I mean, to your point, I think like we get to this point where it's like, oh, this is fine, right? Like, you know, I'm doing like, and I've done that too, right? Like, you know, I'm sort of like, oh, like I'm comfortable, my bills are paid, like, you know, I've got interesting projects, like, and you know, I think for some people like that satisfies them and that's what they want. Like, you know, you kind of want a lifestyle business, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think where you find inspiration, like that's a question of like what drives you personally.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's going to be different for everybody. I think for me, like I just you know, this is probably like something to work out with my therapist, but like, you know, I mean, like I'm always like in this kind of work, like, you know, first, like it was like, okay, I need to like, can I sell a blog for $1,000, right? And then it's like, can I hit a 10K month? And then it's like, okay, can I get to like, you know, consistent 10K months? And like, you know, you just kind of keep laddering up. And like, for me, it's very hard to look at where I'm at objectively. You know, I just like look at like, okay, who's 3 steps ahead of me, right? And so like, I just sort of like have that going on in my head, but like also every now and then I'm just like, I just want to take a nap. So like, you know, so like those parts of my brain do battle a little bit, I think.
Yeah. I think for me, it's like it's the minimum is like, I want to be making more than I'm spending.
Yeah.
I want to be consistently investing in assets, whether that's just a retirement account in the stock market or more speculative investments or other businesses, something that has the potential to pay off, turn money into more money. And then on the higher side, I'm motivated by building, like I like building stuff. And so to me, like, like there's this consistent thing where like people set these goals for themselves, and the moment they hit them, it's usually like the type of mentality that gets someone to hit a 10K month, hit a 20K month is the type that like once you hit it, it's kind of like, like, okay, like what next? Like, what am I trying to do now? Like how do I turn that into something that like sticks around, or how can I build something that goes beyond myself? Like there just seems to be like, there's always something more that people are trying to do, to where even when you're hitting what a lot of people would consider great income, it's like, or you move, or like, you are a dumbass like me and move to like the highest, expense area in the country. Like, so
I don't know that moving to San Diego is like necessarily a bad lifestyle choice, but no, but I agree. Like like that's something that's like been a big theme for 2023 was like, I told can't remember who it was, but like this is I probably will make like slightly less money than I made last year, but like it's still been the best year of business for me because like I've built so many things, or I'm in the process of building so many things. Whereas last year was just kind of like trying to hit income goals, right?
Yeah.
Like, like I have a collaboration with like a designer and a developer, and we're building a web design collective.
Okay.
Like with Grace Baldwin, like we're creating a video series around like, brand messaging and product marketing, and like building all these things together that sort of feed into each other is really fun and helps you build your online presence. And, so.
And these are the types of things like there's no short-term payout from these, but like, being involved in stuff like that is what puts you in a situation where the market crashes and you have all these contacts you can reach out to and be like, hey, what are you doing? Or, hey, do you got any work? Or, these are all things that take work. Building a web design agency, launching a content series, like you are sacrificing free time and leisure time to do that for free. And it's going to result in value to you down the road.
But it's interesting that we're having this conversation now. Like, and I think this goes back to this question, where do you find inspiration, right? Like, like I was talking about like my mom and her like side business, like making wreaths on Etsy, like which you can find at sleighbellstudio.com. Like go look for it. Nice. But like I was talking to her and she's like, oh, I just like making stuff, and that's like kind of how it is really. Like I, all of these projects, like, it's just fun to build stuff, really. Like, but you can't do that until you've gotten yourself to like at least a level of stability where you're like, okay, I know that like I'm not stressing over like, are my bills going to be paid this month? So
exactly. Yeah.
I don't know if this was helpful at all.
You hustle as much as you can to hit the bills. And then what you do from there, like some people tend to approach it more as the lifestyle business, like you mentioned. So like they just kind of are looking to make enough to support what they want to do. But I feel like the people who intentionally want to build a lifestyle business rarely have the follow through to actually build a lifestyle business. Whereas like the people who have a little bit higher, have a little bit more aggressive objections are often the one that can get to that point. So it's kind of this interesting dichotomy of goals alignment. But
so
oh yeah, go for it.
I know we're wrapping up, but I did have one more tip for client picking up that I didn't want to drop, which was case studies. Make case studies. Like it's not like going to get you a client directly. Like, I mean, have to like,
but yeah,
I suppose it can, right? But like, that has not, like, the number of times this year that like, I mean, I've only made one case study so far, but the ease with which I've been able to close clients by just sending that thing out every time. And like, I've got another interview like in a week or two for like the next one. Like it's going to make your life so much easier. Just go do it. Like line up interviews, write them up, like, anyway, that's all I have to say on that, but strongly recommend.
Want to address this question here from Alex, who's asking if email pitching is no longer the best pursuit for client acquisition, what is the most efficient way? And I would honestly say like LinkedIn, but it's with LinkedIn, it's a combination of like fully leveraging the channel. So it's like a combination of posting content, directly connecting with and networking with people, and direct pitching. Like you still want to be direct pitching people, but maybe instead of like doing it via a connection request, you kind of like start with a conversation and then mention, hey, like, you know, do you need any help with messaging or writing or whatever, specifically connecting with people who are in roles where they could potentially hire you, stuff like that. That's my take. What are your thoughts on that, Chris?
I mean, I totally agree with that. And I think like, it's interesting to me to hear you say that, because like the first year that I was on LinkedIn, like I was just sitting there like blasting out my thoughts and like piecing out like, why isn't this working for me? Right.
Yeah.
And like, I think it is like to be an effective social seller, like, and this is still something for me by far that I'm still working on, particularly like the outreach component is not something that I do nearly enough, but like building relationships, like you could probably, without posting content much at all, just comment, like pick 10 or 20 people that you want to build relationships with in your space. Just comment on their stuff every time they post, you know, and then like,
and not the shitty comments, like actually like have a discussion, you know?
Yeah.
Like actually, like if it's something that is a good, especially if it's on stuff that is connected to your services, you know, the stuff that you're trying to offer. And you don't need to do content, but the most effective content that you can post is case studies or case studies and breakdowns. Breakdowns are like, they're like a sneaky case study where you didn't actually work for someone, but everyone feels like you did because you're breaking down how they succeeded. Like I saw this so much earlier in my career, where people would post these big, extensive breakdowns of like large brands. So like this one guy I know, he closed 100K worth of business by doing a breakdown of HubSpot's marketing strategy.
I know who you're talking about. I think
Chris
Chris von Wilpert.
Yeah. And the thing about this case study, he did not work for HubSpot like at all. You know, this was a solely he had no behind the scenes data, just a third party doing this big, like doing the legwork to break down this big complex company. Probably, I would say 50% of the things that he pointed out had nothing to do with HubSpot's actual success. Like it didn't matter whether it was real or not. And most importantly, HubSpot's content marketing strategy is the least relevant thing to any of the people who are hiring him for content marketing.
100%.
Like nobody can lose 200 million for 5 years. You know, like that's not an option for 99% of companies. Anymore. So their content marketing strategy is not a repeatable one.
And I believe that their marketing, like their head of marketing, actually offered him a job as a result of that that case study. Like it was unbelievable.
And,
like
and the reason for that, he did a level of legwork that was just visually impressive. You got into this article and it just did not stop. It just went on and on and on. And like nobody fucking read that thing. Like nobody actually read through that whole thing. Like what people do is you get into that, they start reading and they go, wow, this is detailed. And then they keep scrolling and they're like, wow, this dude did a lot. And then they read one or two pieces and then they're like, shoot, this guy knows his shit. We need to talk to him about content marketing. That's how like most people interpret subject matter expertise. It's not like, it doesn't even have to be real. It can just be perceived, because that's what what you use to sell is not your skills. It's the perception of your skills. And so stuff like that, you're tapping into the trust equity and expertise equity of these big brands that people have heard of.
He did like 10 of those too. They're on like Sumo, I think, still. Like, yeah, I'm just sitting here listening to you. I'm like, I need to do more of those. Like, you know,
we all do, dude. Like,
yeah. No, but those are great examples. And I have nothing to add to that. Like, so yeah.
So you've been working on a web design agency. You've been working on a content series. Anything else that you've kind of been, had in the
Yeah.
mix?
Probably too many things. Like, really just like trying to like niche my own business, like really aggressively
Dial in
into
your offer.
into like messaging strategy and web copy. So I mean, I think those are kind of like the primary things at this point.
Yeah.
And yeah. So yeah, and are we wrapping up at this point, I guess, or
Sure. Yeah.
yeah,
I think
yeah.
we got to most of the questions here. We had a question from Steve about like he's in a big
Oh yeah.
cash flow crunch, asking about advice on like closing clients fast. Any thoughts on that?
I mean, I would like email, like kind of what we were saying earlier. I mean, the first thing I would do would be like every single client or prospect, like I would email them and just remind them you exist.
Yep.
Like, be like, hey, remember that conversation we had? Or, like I was thinking about that because blah, blah, blah. Or, hey, I saw you on LinkedIn. Like, is there anything that like I can do to be helpful? Like, and that's particularly useful. I mean, finding 700, 800 is like, in 2 days might be a bit of a stretch, but like, it's not unheard of to like, bring in something that fast, like
And
that way.
Steve, I would reach out to the clients who haven't paid invoices. I would like reach out to them all and like just be like, hey, like like can you pay this by this Friday? Like just let them like please pay this by this Friday. They may not. This is one thing where like you typically want to charge half up front so you don't find yourself in a position where you really rapidly need the payment. But obviously we've all been there. I would do that, and then I would also just like I would reach out to everyone you've ever done work for, and also everyone like any your warm network. Like I've had students who literally tell me nobody I know has a business. I'm like, reach out to friends and family anyway. They do, and land like a 5-figure gig from someone they didn't even know had a business. Like, don't underestimate warm contacts. Like I have a friend too who like a lot of times when he needs work, he just posts on Facebook. Fucking Facebook. Who uses
Seriously.
Facebook? And he gets gigs. Like he gets gigs from reaching out to just people who know him and being like, hey, I got some openings. And
I'm no expert on Facebook, but like I definitely know like a couple of people who have like literally built their like entire business on Facebook.
Yeah. And
like,
and I'm not talking about a business page. I'm talking about their organic, just regular social media profile.
Yeah. And to that, like one other thing I would just add on the paid invoice thing is like, I just think that like there is a certain amount of that going around with the whole like SaaS nuclear winter thing right now. That may not be the clients that you're talking about, but like I've definitely had like an uptick in clients who like are very hungry to get the work, but like then payment time comes and they're like, so like, yeah. I think there's a little bit of like, not that helps with your situation, but like,
you're not alone on that. Yeah. Like,
yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for hopping on, Chris. Appreciate you sharing your thoughts and experiences with us. Where can people connect with you? Where's the best way to connect with you?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn, like LinkedIn.in, like LinkedIn/in/ccollinsdc. I'm still on Twitter, but I haven't posted there forever because maybe you have. I don't know.
No, I'm off.
Yeah,
I'm off Twitter.
We're all running away.
Yeah.
And like my web address is christophercollins.co.
Here it is.
There you go. Yep.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks again, Chris. Thanks everyone for hopping on, asking questions, and yeah, I'll see you all on the next one.
All right. Cool. Thanks.